think something we talked about in the beginning was the pressure and just me feeling like I love that. Like, tell me I can't do it because I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to move mountains to do it. And so a recession is just kind of amplifies that as well. So I'm a wartime general. I like war. Bring it on.
Welcome to Sobremesa Podcast, a show featuring interviews with up-and-coming tech founders. You'll hear their stories, key learnings, and the challenges they face as they scale their startups. You'll also get a glimpse into the latest trends and news from true insiders in their industries. Your host, Matthias at FJ Labs, will run the show in the authentic Sobremesa style. That special time spent after a good meal, hanging with friends, and having interesting conversations. So grab your coffee and enjoy the show.
Welcome everyone to Sobremesa Podcast. Today we'll have Andre Kazimierski, founder and CEO of Improovy. Super interesting company, part of FJ's portfolio, which is basically building an Uber for painters. It's an online marketplace based in Chicago, connecting expert painters and contractors on one side with homeowners who are looking for an upgrade of their homes done in a very easy, hassle-free manner on the other side. Andre's taking an industry that's literally hundreds of years old and applying tech to provide a much, much better experience. So Andre, so good to see you. Welcome to Sobremesa and thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Excited to chat.
Great. So Andre, as we were discussing before, this is a Sobremesa, so we can take the conversation wherever we want. But I think it would be good if we start right from the beginning and, tell us a little bit about what you've done before Improovy, what led you to where you are today, because I think there's a lot of things in your background and personality that brought you where Improovy is today. So let's kick it off with that.
Yeah, so let me just turn off Slack here. So in terms of just my background, so I've been in the home improvement industry for going on now 16 years. I started my first painting company when I was 19, and really, I think the seed of Improovy and the idea and the passion that revolves around making small business owners' lives better started when I was a kid. So I saw my mom. She was a first-generation immigrant from Poland, came here, saw her just grind as a small business owner. And at the end of the day, she didn't really have a ton to show for it. And, I helped her build her first website, created kind of like a baseline CRM when I was like 12 years old, and just got enamored with ways to make her life easier as a small business owner. She could grow her small cleaning company in Chicago. And so I saw that. And then, of course, while in college, to basically pay for books and beer, I launched my own painting company in the western suburbs of Chicago. So I started knocking on doors and started getting painting jobs. And there is an element of this industry where it's like, how can a college kid who just picks up a paintbrush start a business and compete with local companies? And that's part of the dynamic of kind of where this industry is heading and why it's stuck where it's at.
Was it you literally going out and painting houses, on demand, on request?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would go knock on like 1,000 doors, I think the first year I did, all over the western suburbs, grab leads, do estimates in person, which is, a process in itself, and trying to quote things out and hopefully it gets right. And then we have to start the job, pick colors. We have to find the right painters, all of that. So I didn't do too much painting myself because I, frankly, was not a very good painter, right? But I was really, I saw my mom as a small business owner. I wanted to learn that skill set. And so that's something that, what was the hardest thing I could do in college? Start a business. And so I did it. And that theme kind of reflected kind of every single stage of the process of starting that first company, ended up scaling that to multiple locations. So one in Wisconsin, we started a new division out there, and then in Michigan. And so, yeah, that was my first, I guess, foray into the home improvement field, just starting my own painting business. So
was that the last company that you had before Improovy, or did you do another thing afterwards?
So my mom passed away during that tenure of that first business in my mid-20s. And so she still had that name, her namesake, Sophia's Cleaning Service, under her name, Sophia, right? And so I took that over. And so I had to learn quick on the differences of managing different teams, all of that. And that did introduce me to the kind of like the subcontractor model, so to speak, which is small business. We're deploying small business owners. I mean, these are hundreds, maybe even thousands of houses every 2 weeks or so that we'd be deploying them to. So there's a lot of logistics there. There's a lot of quality control. So I kind of cut my teeth on the model that currently kind of evolved into the Improovy platform. I did that for a few years, went back into the painting field. I'm like, okay, wait a second. So clean a house, it's $150 per thing. A paid job is $4,000 a job. Like I just did the math there. So, and I created kind of a self perpetuating loop. I figured out SEO, cut my teeth on that, launched multiple locations through that. And then I launched another painting company, and that led to a successful exit a couple of years back. And then around that time, 2019-ish, is when I started Improovy, because when I launched that second painting company, nothing changed in the 10 years prior when I launched my first painting business. And I was just astonished. And then I learned SEO and then kind of the scaling part of it. And I'm like, wait a second, there's a better way to do this.
So for correct me if I'm wrong, but these two first businesses were completely bootstrap, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what led you to say, with Improovy, let's do something similar on the tech side, but let's go with VC money this time? And there's a lot of listeners that might be thinking of starting a company and saying, okay, should I go the VC route or should I bootstrap the company? And even these days, with access to capital being a bit tougher than what it was last year or previous years, like how was that decision-making process, and what are some of the pros and cons that you can think of?
I think first and foremost, I hit my head as a small business owner, and I asked myself why running those businesses, and how could we have scaled quicker? How could we have expanded quicker? Okay, I have this special insight and this special skill with scaling and search optimization, all that stuff. Like, how do I apply it? And I couldn't scale those businesses fast enough, and so I started looking into startups in the space, and just built the first algorithm that we used for pricing, within the first week of launching Improovy and all that. And I'm like, okay, I figured something out that's fairly special in terms of the industry, the approach, all of that. How do I scale faster? And really, like, when you bootstrap a business, you're trying to put food on the table and grow the business and keep your employees. Like, I never felt like I was really fulfilling my purpose when I was doing that. And so I'd like to say, like, being a startup, I don't care if it's Improovy or anything, like this is the pressure, the scaling, quadrupling our team in the last 2 months and just filling up our seats with 8 players and being able to launch a new location over the weekend. Basically,
the good side of stress, so to speak.
But it's like, if I was doing something else, I wouldn't feel fulfilled. I wouldn't feel like my purpose was really maximizing my potential. And the VC route, I get to, number one, just be around incredible people who push me to be better. And I found the importance of surrounding yourself with people that are way smarter than you and try to keep up, as opposed to being kind of a big fish in a small pond. And I also just thrive on that pressure. That's just, I'd be doing something else in terms of just scaling another business if it wasn't for Improovy, because this is what I was meant to do.
That's awesome. And this is, aligns perfectly with our thesis, especially when we look at marketplaces that are kind of older industries. We want someone, or at least someone on the team, who has real deep industry understanding. And I think that's key. And it shows, because it's not easy to apply a lot of the learnings that you had over the years and also convince a lot of the stakeholders to kind of digitize as well.
Yeah, it's really hard without those insights. It's like you have to have that gut kind of feeling built up on where to head next, what to say no to, all of that combined. It helps us excel and fast forward our growth as well. So, and that's what we're seeing is we're putting all of that kind of gut feeling and aggregated basically the dream team of this industry. I've never seen a team like this that we built completely remotely, zero office space, anything like that. We operate on Zoom. Like, it is incredible the culture we were able to achieve. And I think part of it is just launching a company in COVID and having to deal with the uncertainties and having to deal with everything. We went through Techstars completely virtual as well. So I learned so much of what we're doing in terms of building a fully remote team and applying it today because of that experience when we went through, I think it was 2020, right in the middle of COVID. So,
Andre, I got to ask before we jump into more, business and tactic questions.
Yeah.
Because you launched 2019 or so, and that was about the time when Paints a similar company to Improovy, and I mean, I'm sure you'll be quick to point out the differences, got acquired by around $75 million by PPG Industries. And $75 million exit is nothing to sneeze at, but maybe it's not the $1 billion outcome that some VCs or even some founders would hope for. Was that a endorsement in any way? Because, hey, this is actually, tech could be applied to the painting industry, or maybe a deterrence in some other way? Or how did you think about that at that time?
I looked at it and still look at it as an MVP. Right. I know that concept applies, but now layer on 15 years of expertise and just someone who honestly is just obsessed with changing the industry and making it better, the lives of these small business owners better. And I think that's what was missing from that is, they had their exit. I appreciate them kind of laying the groundwork for what it could look like and also what not to do. And so we're formed with the belief that if we make the lives of our supply side, which are painters, our small business owners, better, and allow them to achieve the American dream, because a lot of them are first generation immigrants, just like my mom, that's what's going to unlock the true power of contractors and a platform like Improovy. And that's what we're keenly focused on. I think that's maybe they missed the boat because they got some backlash as well. So, it's and I got quoted in like Pro Remodeler magazine featured me for something or another. And I said in 2018, I think it was, the change in the industry is going to come from within. It's going to come from a team that is in tune with the intricacies and all the finesse that it takes to do this at scale. And that's why I believe we're succeeding. And like I said, it's just an MVP for us. $1 billion company is a whatever you want to call it, a dragon, unicorn, whatever it is. That's a result of us doing the right things with the right people, the right intent, and that's exactly what we're doing. And I think that's kind of the difference. But I also I appreciate what they did. We also hired one of their first hires. And so I have a little bit more insight then, and you could talk to Megan a little bit about the differences she's seeing too. So.
Andrew, before moving to more the tactic side, and I want you to explore some of the learnings that they're experiencing as a fast scaling business and some of the insights that you can share maybe. But before that, let's maybe take a step back and paint the status quo of, and that's a pun intended, obviously, of what the industry looks like before Improovy. What are some sort of the value propositions that we're offering on the supply side, on the demand side, and maybe let's take it from there.
Yeah, I think there's so much to be said of what painters kind of struggle with and small business owners struggle with. I think number one is finding enough work to keep their crews busy. So there's over 230,000 independent small business painting business owners in the United States. So we have a large supply base. 83% of them or so are basically two chucks in a truck. So one guy who's been going through the hamster wheel year after year, scaling up. In the winter, he has to lay off, his helper. He has to hire somebody else. And he's been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. No wonder, new generations don't want to get into the trades. They see their parents and people who operate in the industry just miserable, right? I mean, addiction rates in this industry, alcoholism, all of those things are just rampant. And it's because the system is set up for them to lose. So they can't find enough work. They can't keep their crews busy. They can't scale up. And all of the things that they're doing on the business side is inefficient, right? Everything from those estimates I talk about, you go out to do an estimate, spend a couple hours, do a sale in person, follow up. And then you book the job, you pick up a check, all of that stuff, right? And so I looked at it like, okay, how do we take the hardest parts, the things that they struggle with most, sales, marketing, not only the acquisition, but the entire management cycle of it, from first contact to 5-star review. That's where Improovy kind of plays in the space. So one thing that I wanted to correct and just to supplement kind of your description of Improovy, we not only connect the contractor and homeowner, but we make sure that the entire job goes well. So Improovy is responsible for the job, for the customer service, for your satisfaction, and then follow up afterwards and making sure it goes well from start to finish. So it doesn't end at the lead acquisition. It's the entire life cycle of that job. And that's where we win, because the pain points for them, they can't manage the business, they can't find enough work, therefore they can't find enough workers, they can't make any money, they make just as much as a minimum wage employee when they're working in their business. That's the average painter makes right around 40K a year or so. And so that's the dynamic we're playing in here. And so those are the pain points on that side. On the homeowner side, it's a reflection of those pain points that are rooted in the contractor kind of miserable experience, right? Contractors, and it's no surprise too, contractors are not reliable. They don't show up on time. They don't do what they say. They don't do a good job, cut corners, are too busy to even pick up the phone and call you back from the get-go. And that's reflective of the entire start to finish kind of situation.
So what does that translate into in terms of experience? If I want to repaint my bathroom or living room, what would an experience be with a traditional painting company versus Improovy?
Yeah, so you'd probably reach out to a couple to get a quote. Perhaps half of them or 30 to 50% of them will actually get back to you within the day. And then you have to set up an appointment. So next Saturday, I'll come out to the house, do a walkthrough, take a look at the job, and then I'll write up a quote. Probably take me a couple of days to write up the quote. So it's next Tuesday, Wednesday. You're still waiting on a quote. You probably text me, say, hey, where's my quote? Send you the quote afterwards. Say, oh, sorry, I got super busy. I was working on the job, all that stuff. And then, you try to book a stuff. Okay, I want to work with this guy. Let's book something. Well, I'm sorry, I'm booked out for 2 months. That's typically the first part of that process. And then once they show up, accountability, communication, all of that is kind of left in the dust, because frankly, the painter's too busy working on the jobs themselves to focus on that stuff. So with Improovy, you get a quote, you hop on our website, you get a quote instantly. You get a call from one of our painting experts to walk you through the job. You could start your job in 48 hours, and by that Friday, you're already done with the job. So we're waiting on the quote. Yeah, you're getting the job done. So
I'll stop you there, because I think there's a lot of things to unpack. And some of the criticisms for tech home improvement companies is okay, where do you draw the line between a traditional painting company or a traditional home renovation company? And what's the difference versus Improovy or even a block renovation or other similar companies? I think there's a lot of technology that goes into what you just described, meaning a seamless experience. You get a quote in 48 hours. You can get your job done much faster in a much seamless experience. But can you tell us a little bit about what goes into that? There's a lot of integrations. You can pre-populate things. You're talking to expert painters as well to make things faster. Let's go a little bit deeper into the tech that goes behind it.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's that quote process, right? So it's not getting a quote in 48 hours. You get a quote within 5 minutes with us, as opposed to somebody going out to the house. And so we use property stats and we plug that into our algorithm, and that pops out a quote. And then you're able to book digitally. So it's a fully digitized experience from that end, using just past job site data that kind of layers onto our data set and gets smarter as we continue to book work and see production rates. And then it's actually the deployment and booking. So we've virtualized the color selection process as well. So we've partnered with Sherwin-Williams to provide a free color consultation where they actually show you what the house would look like, and you get an expert designer on the phone or on Zoom or otherwise. And so you can do all of this. What usually takes days or weeks now takes minutes and hours. And so that all of that kind of rolled up. That's like the first part of the process. And then what we do is take the top painters that are within your area. We've screened them, and we've not only used behavioral interviews and kind of like screening for insurance and all of the things that you just need to get on the Improovy platform, but we also match that painter's skill set based on what kind of equipment do they have, what specialties are they, interior only, are they, there's certain things that we can tell from everything from past job site photos to asking them what equipment they have to determine what their specialty is. Because a lot of this is just finding the right fit at the right time, and that's kind of where we kind of play into that equation. And because we have over 300 plus painters on our platform, we can basically I think there's 1 or 2 jobs in the last year or two that we were unable to fulfill based on a timeline, on a quick turnaround, because of the system we run. So you get a price instantly. We use all of that data to get better as we go along. You're able to book digitally. So it's basically like Amazon. It's like going from Blockbuster to Netflix when it comes to digitizing this. This is only step 1 of the process. I imagine in the future, it's going to be 1 click. You're going to get a price and book within seconds, and be able to deploy a painter within the same day.
Andrew, how many of these painters are, or none of these painters are actually Improovy employees, right? These are all contractors and on-demand employees, right?
Precisely.
So I think let's go back to the supply side for a little bit. And what I'm hearing is something that's very aligned with what we call the future of work, which is basically letting individuals or small business owners, perform high leverage, high satisfaction activities, and then outsource the rest to the platform. And I think Improovy fits perfectly with this. Slice is another portfolio company of ours doing this for pizzerias, Odeco for coffee shops. And I think you guys are doing this for painters. And you laid out a little bit, what are some of those tools that you're giving out? Are you thinking at some point providing SaaS for small owners, for small business owners, or developing these tools in a much more systematic way? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah. So, our North Star is always going to be our contractors, how to make their lives better and more efficient and effective. And how do we allow them to have tools that are seamless? And there's a platform adoption issue in this industry as well. These guys are very much old school. And so having them download an app and manage all of that stuff, there is kind of a hand-holding side of it, but there are 2 or 3 initiatives that we have unique insights on that we're testing out. I can't really go into that too far in terms of kind of what we're deploying on the supply side, but they are pretty excited about it. And we're seeing their production rates go up. So they're able to actually produce more job because of the tools we're trying out and giving them that we're using internally first, testing out. Yeah. They're actually able to increase their output 3x versus what they typically would do. And
That's
it's
impressive.
Not only filling demand, it's more, it's basically more, every hour you put in on the job, how do we maximize that? How do we make sure that those efficiencies and your crews are performing at top level? Because we know what that looks like, For
entrepreneurs thinking, and we stumbled upon this problem many different times with portfolio companies, is, okay, I found something that's very useful for the supply side of the marketplace, and should I charge for this? Yes or no? And I can think of different examples of why you could charge for this just to generate an additional revenue stream, or maybe not charge and monetize different things, or just keep them as part to lock the supply in and just to generate engagement and stickiness in the supply side. How do you approach this?
Really depend. For us, we're fueled by a business model that's able to support a free, kind of a free premium or some sort of level for that. We see their output increase and our revenues increase when that output. So it's aligned, right? And so when they get better because of the tools we're giving them and we're developing for them, they're actually able to do more through the Improovy program. Or the platform that we're running, right? So it's a little bit different, but at the same time, it really depends on your timetable and how quickly you're able to find a way to monetize, and then also obviously your business model. The business model has to make sense from a long-term perspective. Okay, once you have them on the platform, how are you going to deliver enough value that it makes sense for them to use your tool? And then when you 10x that value, that's when you could kind of trip a cord and start charging and all of that stuff. But for us, it's we have a business model that's set in, if we're able to basically do what they want to do in terms of 3x their output, make more money, live a sustainable life, achieve the American dream, we win as well because of the business model we set in. So there's different approaches to that and different ways to attack the supply side, and other companies have done differently. But that's kind of our approach.
Got it.
Yeah. So I imagine it's going to be free. And we're going to continue to build on that supply side until they can't imagine a life without us.
That makes total sense. And we've seen, to your point on business model, if there's not an easy way to monetize in a different way, maybe you can charge for the SaaS. Otherwise, you can monetize through the take rate like you're doing, or financial initiatives like others are doing. So let's delve a little bit more into unit economics. This is obviously a low recurrent business, right? Like how do you approach this is in terms of how do you balance just going to an extreme? You ideally have very high average order value, AOV, and very high recurrence. On the other side of the spectrum, you really don't want low recurrence and low AOV. How do you balance that with Improovy, knowing that by definition, painting is a low recurrence business?
Yeah. I think every single job should equal 2 more jobs. And the reason I say that is because from my past 16 years of doing this is, I think number one, painting is a high value kind of output type situation, or like visual value. So like you want to talk, okay, you have friends and family come over after a paint. Wow, your house looks completely different. Like that is a story, and we want to plug ourselves into the referral sort of business on that side, and we're seeing it like left and right. It's unbelievable what's happening in our more mature markets like Chicago in terms of repeat and referrals. Hey, I heard about you from this person. I think we've had our first like quadruple or five different generations of referrals from the same seed of the job, but. Here's the thing we have going for us. 1 in 2 American households think about painting, interior, exterior, drywall repairs at some point every single year. And so 1 job on a block should equal, if we do this correctly and really create that network effect, sharing with your neighbors and just talk. We want people shouting from the top of their roofs because they don't have to shout that hard. Right next door, we have our next client. And so that's something that is unique in this industry. Because look around, right? There's a surface to be painted in every single, every single house, interior, exterior, whatever the case may be. So that's first and foremost. And just to solidify that side of things, Sherwin-Williams did a study of painting business owners that have been around for 5+ years. Do you know what their number 1 lead acquisition channel was?
No.
90% of their 90% of them said repeat referrals fuel the majority of their business after 5 years. And so we look at this industry, we look at painting as a one-shot type deal. When it comes down to it, when you're in a market long enough, it becomes a sort of snowball effect. And I've seen it in this industry in past businesses that I've run over the last 15 years. It takes a while for that to happen, but we're already seeing it after the first 2 years of running things in Chicago, how that's going to continues to build up. And then we also, have them post it. 80% of our clients last month posted a 5-star review online. And that obviously is another megaphone that increases those network effects. Our painters get a bonus for it. Painters are happy. Our team is happy. We're driven by that customer experience and so on and so forth. And so,
And I think there's a lot to it here. And not to give any numbers away, but you guys, because of what we discussed on the supply side, you were able to command, and because of the service that you provide on the demand side, you're able to command a pretty high take rate as well. So like that helps with economics as well. And I know the numbers and I know they worked out. Even the LTV to CAC, even if that recurrence is low, the LTV to CAC is fairly impressive. So I think the other side of this question is on the CAC side, on the customer acquisition cost. And I was blown away by your strategy on SEO and search engine optimization, which is solving the chicken and egg problem. Once you have these clients, to your point, or referrals, you pretty much kick off a network effect and you can hopefully get that flywheel going. But in order to kickstart that, you've implemented a couple of smart strategies that would be great to share some tips or some advice for founders out there looking to implement something similar.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to find, what are your customers searching? And then what are the things they searched before and after that search that you've identified? And so when I look at, for example, when somebody searches for a painter near them, Painter Chicago, like that's the one that we kind of cut our teeth with in terms of growth and taking over the first market. And you see us on the first in the 3-pack with more reviews than the first 5 companies combined. And so that's a huge kind of side of it is generating kind of delight and continuing that flywheel, and then showing it off, obviously, with whatever platform your customers are going to. Google is obviously the preferred platform. Soon it'll be friends, family, neighbors, network effects, and all of that. So that's first and foremost. The second thing we started doing is attacking, people also asked, like, how much does a painter cost in Chicago? So we took over that search result. And so at some point, what you have to imagine is like, if you are the central source of truth for your customers, be it paint colors, be it, whatever, however this applies to different industries or whatever. For us, it's paint colors, paint pricing, scheduling, all of that stuff. And so we take over those things and we become the central source of truth. So in Chicago,
all roads lead to Rome. Yeah.
And so in Chicago, we're actually determining the price of the market, because people are clicking on our page and seeing what the price of the market is. And so our supply side, what we found kind of a unique insight, they're Googling the same things our customers are. And because we're able to control that dynamic from the perceived sort of pricing and everything, I think that's, that central source of truth. I think one of our mentors early on in Techstars really, really kind of rung true for when he said that's what it takes to take over the industry. That's one of the companies is another $1 billion player in the industry, in the home improvement industry that he invested in. And when I heard that, I'm just like, yes, that's how you should think of it. And when you do that, when you set that you become the central source of truth, Google says, okay, wait, you're an expert, you have authority in this industry, and there's a lot of trust behind it, right? Because it's not only throwing out numbers, it's data behind it, and you're doing the research, you're using all that experience. And so now every single new location we launch is able to rank faster, generate and penetrate that market faster. And so we've gotten it to a point where we're able to launch a new location, and in 3.5 weeks, we're starting to generate revenue in there.
Is there, because another, going back to kind of dichotomies that entrepreneurs find themselves at some point of the business, this is the geo expansion is another one. Like, you guys are having a very systematic approach to launching one city first, and the other one, then the other one, with a very systematic playbook. Some other founders say, you know what, I want to launch or have a national footprint as fast as possible. How what do you think do you think it depends on the business, or why do you think launching city by city is better than, I'll do this from the get-go nationally in case another competitor might, step on my shoes before me?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what problem are you solving for who, and where are they looking to solve that problem? Like the national strategy is just because humans look locally for this stuff, right? They don't look somebody with a house in Chicago isn't going to look for a painter in Arkansas, right? And so that's the dynamic from that level. But I think on a national scale as well, like, I mean, it really depends on your customers are using some means to solve the problem. Find where you could interject in that same way that they're doing things, do it better, and then become a central source of truth in that. And so geo expansion is one form of it, but there's certainly a lot of different forms of this, and it really is. This search data is public now. Like, you could look up Google Trends, and you could just go through your customer journey, how they found you. Look at the things people also asked, all that stuff, like all the related key terms. And that tells you, and then cross-reference it with customer interviews and jobs to be done interviews and all of the things that we have at our disposal as founders. And you just create an entire roadmap of where you need to be to gain that trust, be it on a short-term, long-term basis. For us, it's geo expansion, just because the industry is what it is, but it's different for every single founder that I've talked. That obviously SEO is something I could talk about and kind of dive into for years and never stop talking about it. So, but I've seen different founders approach this differently. It really comes down to where are your customers finding the solution to their problem? How do you interject? and how do you become the better solution,
Yeah, and it's at the end of the day, it's also a matter of focus, capital deploy, because this is a very local business in nature. So to your point before, you could do that maybe, but it'll require a ton of focus to launch multiple cities at the same time and a ton of capital as well, like maybe Uber did at some point, which is another very local business. Yeah. So related to this, and I keep hammering on the challenges and purpose, because I think we could draw a lot of learnings from this. And the good thing about talking to an early stage startup like yours, fast growing early stage startup, is that you're experiencing this today. When I'm not talking to Andre 5 years from today or 10 years from today, a multi-billion-dollar company with the benefit of hindsight. Like, these are current challenges, and that's why I think this is so interesting. How do you deal with the seasonality? This is another challenge inherent to the painting business. How do you deal with seasonality in Chicago? And how do you think about that geo expansion or ways to mitigate this seasonality?
Yeah, I think two ways: the short-term and the long-term solution. The short-term is to layer on non-seasonal type locations. So, locations, we're doing the Sun Belt, right? Florida, Tampa. We just launched over the weekend in Tampa, Riverview.
That's awesome.
Look us up. We'll be ranking in a couple of days, hopefully. Plano and all of that. So there is kind of a, if you look at the seasonal trend in the winter, exteriors dry up in the north. We're going to supplement that with the year-round kind of. It's actually too hot to paint in Florida in the summer, and so this is when. And so that's how we're going to just target, just be very strategic and thoughtful about what markets we're launching next. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're only going to launch those markets, because we have to drop a pin in every single major metro, mid-metro in the United States, from coast to coast. But how we do that and the sequencing of that, I think, is attacks some of the seasonality on a short-term basis. Ultimately, long-term, it comes down to matching supply and demand, right? So in the winter, how do we spur, the thousands of people who maybe didn't go with us or didn't follow through on, getting a discount, sort of in the same way surge pricing kind of works. But I think it's less kind of drastic. But there is a supply and demand in an equilibrium that I believe that in 2-3 years we're going to be talking about, where it's going to be like obviously, like, people will pay or don't need to pay as much in the winter. Painters don't need to get paid as much in the winter, because what's their alternative? Not working at all, right? And so we're still keeping those businesses alive while serving a larger set of kind of our demand side. And so ultimately, it will come down to kind of our version, so to speak, of surge pricing. And I think that also applies to every mid-range home, flooring, replacing gutters, all of this stuff that you're able to basically find contractors to do and use the same model we are, and then using that kind of supply and demand equilibrium to unlock liquidity. And so I actually believe that the painting industry, $40 billion, is a pretty big industry, just painting alone, right? I believe when we're done with it, we're going to double the industry size. We're going to take all those DIY and make it so easy to paint your house that it's no brainer. It's going to be an $80 billion industry. In the same way you look at Uber and what they did with rideshare and expanding the taxi industry, right? And I believe that same dynamic is going to play out in a different way, and perhaps more than most people kind of expect us to do. I think there's a new way of doing this for a new generation.
That's super interesting. Because another frequent question we get, and specifically for this sort of verticals, and at FJ we're big proponents of the verticalization of marketplaces, but sometimes this is a bit of a contrarian view, right? Because take the whole proptech or real estate space. So vertical of that could be home improvement. A sub vertical could be painting, and so some people may roll their eyes saying, okay, this is too small, or this is a niche, but when does a niche become too niche-y in a way? And what you're explaining right now is the market is not only large enough, and maybe you can talk about some of the incumbents, which I was surprised to hear how big they are, but also you can actually expand this by making it extremely easy for people to paint. And that's actually a great point I haven't thought about.
And that's our entry point. Interior and exterior painting are some of the most frequent home improvement things you do in your house ever. And so, as we know from previous generations, once you have a guy, Bob down the block will do everything for you. We want to be the new digital version of that for a new home generation of homeowners. When you think of upgrading your house, redoing your floors, they're giant projects, right? With a lot of leeway in terms of take rate and all that. But that's when it comes down to it. Contractors in those industries still experience the same things that we're solving for contractors in the painting industry. And not that the painting industry isn't large enough. It's more so like, if we could change the world, why just start, why just focus on the country? So we want to be basically, coast to coast, take over every geo. That's our entry point. We become the one-stop shop for every way to upgrade your space at the click of a button, because we already know the inside of the house, right? We already have that data. We painted it. And so we can now use that data to supplement pricing for build our next algorithm, and create kind of that one-stop shop, the guy, I guess, so to speak, or gal, right? In a home improvement that you use for everything, because they're going to do a good job and be on time and do a great job for your house, and without hassle or without dealing with the normal contractor experience, which frankly sucks. I know I've gone through it as a homeowner, right? So I've tried to look for a painter because my crews were too booked years ago, and that's where I was like, this is what people deal with. I couldn't believe it. Like I'm like, I just can't believe it.
And maybe you're not even painting your house unless you really, really need to, or unless you're moving out or moving in. But making it so easy as to, it's always a hustle to paint your house. But if you make it very easy to book it, Improovy gets it done, takes care of the entire thing. Maybe the frequency even increases a little bit. So I think that's an interesting point. Andre, related to this, and another benefit of having industry insiders on the show is we can talk about macro and talk about industry trends from an insider's perspective. And so, obviously the Fed, and I'm pivoting to more a macro discussion here, but it's related to a question before. The Fed has been hiking rates since the beginning of the year. This obviously had an impact on the real estate space. Mortgage rates are 2x what they were at the beginning of the year. And so I think there's two different ways that we can think about this. And I'm curious to get your thoughts, or two sides of the spectrum. Number one is because of looming recession or inflation, people might say, I'm not going to paint my house this year. Maybe I'll do it next year or the following. And so, painting or home improvement space might go down. Just broad strokes here. Yep. The other side of the coin could be, with high mortgage rates, people are not going to move so much. And maybe instead of investing in a new home and moving out, they're going to reinvest in their current home. And so we might see an actual boost in home improvements. Where do you stand in this discussion? And more broadly, what's kind of your overall take on the market today?
Yeah. So I don't want to set the wrong expectations, but I've launched companies in recessions before in the painting industry, and I had my best years. Literally like the best years. And that's not necessarily because more people were painting or less people were painting. Listen, like we serve an affluent, higher income, property value type base that's not as affected by that. And also understanding like people want to, there's certainly something to be said of that. I'm not necessarily worried about the demand side because I've seen cycles and cycles of this again. I'm not saying it won't affect things. We might have to be a little bit more price conscious, and we will be able to adapt and all of that. But the problem is not everyone will be able to adapt. And so what happens in this industry is there's a top 10, 20% of painters that go into the industry with very little barriers to entry, start a painting business and use the same network, be it the same builder, the same customer to refer all over those, to get their next jobs. And it's been going really, really well because everybody they know are, moving in, out, all that stuff. Like those networks are the first thing that dry up. So I actually look at a recession. I welcome a recession. Number one, I know it's going to hurt us on the demand side. It might slow things down. It might not be as easy pickings, but I would make a bet that we'd be able to compete better than any single painting company in the United States or any contracting company on that side. But really what it unlocks is that supply side. I think it's a once in a generational type thing. The stars lined up for us. We're able to grab the highest quality supply side that are just hurting for work because those initial kind of loops and referral loops all dried up. Those networks are the first thing that dry up in a recession, especially builders and homeowners. We don't even do new construction. So that doesn't really affect us. But what it does affect is a large skilled, super skilled subsect of our supply side and painters who run commercial rates, who could knock out a house, 4,000 square foot house, drywall, paint, prime, all of that stuff in like 2 days. High output type crews who are now hurting for work and who hop on the Improovy platform and do things that, for our homeowners that are unbelievable. And so I think it just unlocks a once in a generational type thing. If we were to raise money, I'm not saying we're going to have to in the next year. If we were, it's to take advantage of that opportunity. It just kind of lines up for us. I welcome the recession because.
So not as worried on the demand side. You could, it could fluctuate a little bit, but given your segment that you're targeting, maybe not, they're not going to see that big of a hit. But on the supply side, there's actually a huge opportunity. I think that's one of the reasons I'm very bullish as well on the current market. Obviously, I don't want a recession. Nobody wants a recession, but there's a lot of things to be excited about in the startup community, especially with high growing and fast growing early stage startups like Improovy. So I think that's a silver lining, at least.
I think something we talked about in the beginning was the pressure and just me feeling like I love that. Like, tell me I can't do it because I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to move mountains to do it. And so a recession is just kind of amplifies that as well. So I'm a wartime general. I like war. Bring it on.
Well, Andre, I can't thank you enough for this fantastic conversation. This was fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks so much.
Before asking for the check on the Sobremesa, the floor is yours. Where can people find more about you, more about Improovy?
Yeah, go to improovy.com. Follow us on Twitter. That's Improovy, Home Improvement Made Groovy. So improovy.com. If you need a painter in Chicago, St. Louis, Ann Arbor, Plano, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, and now Tampa, as of this weekend, Tampa Bay and Hillsborough County. Google us or just hop on the website and we'll get you a quote in minutes and get that job knocked out for you. So absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andre.
Thanks so much. Take care.
All right.
That was great. I mean, feature the mug a little bit more, maybe like
yeah, you didn't show it.
Somehow like